They thought it was just a toy, a harmless heirloom left behind by a dead relative. But inside this dollhouse, the walls whisper. The dolls move when no one's watching, and a little girl's laughter never dies. Tonight, I'll tell you the terrifying story of the dollhouse that didn't just steal sleep, it stole a child's soul.
It all started with an envelope. Elena Carver had not expected to be mentioned in her great-aunt Miriam's will. Miriam was a recluse, someone who had lived on the edge of town in a decaying Victorian mansion that children whispered about, but never dared approach. Elena had visited her only once as a child, and even then, she remembered hiding behind her mother's skirt, unsettled by Miriam's sharp, watchful eyes. So when the lawyer called, informing her that she had inherited a possession of sentimental value, Elena felt more puzzled than grateful. A week later, movers delivered the item to her modest home. A dollhouse. Not just any dollhouse. This one stood almost 4 feet tall, crafted with meticulous detail. Its roof was faded green slate, its windows outlined with delicate trim. Inside, every room was furnished. Carved chairs, velvet couches no larger than Elena's thumb, miniature chandeliers with tiny glass beads. And then there were the dolls. 3 of them. A woman in a blue dress, a man in a brown suit, and a little girl in a cream frock with golden hair. Their glass eyes glimmered in the light, their porcelain faces so finely painted they almost looked alive. When Elena's 7-year-old daughter Sophie saw it, her face lit up. "Mommy, it looks just like a real house!" she squealed. Elena crouched beside her. The resemblance hit her like a jolt. The dollhouse? It was almost identical to Aunt Miriam's real home. The steep gables, the hallways, even the peeling floral wallpaper inside, all mirrored the mansion she vaguely recalled. She forced a smile. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" Sophie nodded eagerly, already reaching for the dolls. Elena hesitated. Something about the figures unsettled her. But how could she say no to Sophie's excitement? "Go ahead. Just be gentle, okay? It's very old." That night, after Sophie had gone to bed, Elena lingered in the living room. The dollhouse sat in the corner, looming larger in the dim light. She leaned closer, frowning. The little girl doll was now in the upstairs bedroom. Earlier, Sophie had placed it in the parlor. She must have gone back and moved it before bed, Elena thought. But then, why did the faintest shiver run through her as she turned away? As she headed upstairs, she froze. From behind her came a sound so soft it could have been mistaken for the settling of wood. A whisper, too faint to catch, too deliberate to ignore. The next morning, Sophie was already on the floor, playing with the dollhouse. She spoke in a hushed tone, as if in conversation. Elena smiled sleepily. "Who are you talking to, sweetheart?" Sophie looked up, her eyes wide with innocence. "The girl. She says her name is Leela." Elena froze. She hadn't told Sophie the doll's name, because the doll didn't have a name. At least, not one she knew. "You mean the doll?" she asked carefully. Sophie shook her head, as though Elena didn't understand. "No, Leela. She told me." Elena forced a laugh, brushing it off. Kids had vivid imaginations. That's all. But later that day, while cleaning, she passed the living room and heard Sophie whispering again. Only this time, she wasn't alone. Another voice answered. It was faint, high-pitched, almost melodic. Elena's skin prickled. She leaned into the doorway. Sophie sat cross-legged before the dollhouse, nodding as though listening. Sophie, Elena called softly. Her daughter jumped, spinning around. Don't scare me, Mommy! Elena's eyes darted to the dollhouse. The little girl doll now stood at the front door of the miniature house, its porcelain face tilted slightly downward, as though it had just turned its head. That night, Elena dreamed of Miriam's mansion. In her dream, she walked through its halls, her footsteps echoing. From upstairs came a whisper, growing louder as she climbed. When she pushed open the bedroom door, she saw the dollhouse waiting for her. And inside the tiny bedroom window, the little girl doll stood. Not porcelain, not still, but alive and smiling. Elena woke in a sweat, her heart pounding. The next morning, she found Sophie pale and groggy at the breakfast table. Didn't you sleep well? Elena asked. Sophie shook her head. Lila kept talking. She wanted me to come play, but I was too tired. Elena nearly dropped her spoon. As days passed, the whispers grew bolder. At first, Elena heard them only faintly at night, like rustling curtains. But soon they crept into the daylight hours, soft voices drifting from the living room, even when Sophie wasn't near the dollhouse. One evening, Elena's husband Mark came home late. Exhausted, he dropped his keys on the counter. What's with the creepy toy? He muttered, glancing at the dollhouse. It was Miriam's, Elena explained. Part of the inheritance. He frowned. It's giving me the creeps. I swear I just saw one of the dolls move. Elena's stomach tightened. She wanted to laugh it off, but she couldn't, because she had seen it too. That night, while Mark slept, Elena crept downstairs. The house was silent, except for the faint hum of the refrigerator. She approached the dollhouse slowly. Her breath caught in her throat. The man doll, which had been by the fireplace earlier, now stood at the window. Its glass eyes glistened as though watching her. Her hands trembled. She reached inside, meaning to pick it up, maybe to prove it was just her imagination. But before her fingers touched the figure, a cold gust of air swept through the room. The dollhouse chandelier swayed. And then she heard it. Elena. Her name, whispered from inside the dollhouse. She stumbled back, her pulse racing. From that night on, things grew worse. Sophie stopped playing with her other toys, spending every waking hour at the dollhouse. She no longer called the little girl doll Lila. She called her friend. One evening, Elena overheard her daughter whisper, "Yes, I'll come with you, but Mommy can't know." Elena's blood ran cold when she confronted Sophie. The girl burst into tears. "Leela says she's lonely. She wants me to stay with her forever." Elena grabbed Sophie's shoulders. "She's not real." But even as the words left her lips, Elena wasn't sure she believed them. Desperate for answers, Elena dug into Miriam's past. Old newspaper archives told a story she had never heard. In 1912, Miriam's younger sister, a little girl named Lila, had vanished without a trace. Some whispered she had been lured into the woods. Others claimed Miriam's obsession with her dollhouse had something to do with it. The family never found the body, but Miriam was never the same again. She grew old, isolated, and bitter, clutching that dollhouse until her dying day. Elena's hands shook as she read. The doll wasn't just a doll. It was Lila, or what was left of her. That night, Elena tried to lock the dollhouse away in the attic. But Sophie screamed, thrashing against her, begging for it back. "Leela says she needs me. She says I can be her sister now." Elena nearly dropped the box in horror. The whispers grew louder that night, no longer faint, no longer hiding. They filled the house, seeping from the walls. Laughter, giggles, voices overlapping. When Elena crept downstairs at midnight, she froze. The dollhouse lights glowed. The dolls were no longer where she had left them. The man and woman now stood at the dining table, their heads tilted toward the child doll, and in the upstairs window, the little girl doll smiled, her porcelain hand slowly raised and waved. Elena snapped. She grabbed a hammer, determined to destroy the cursed thing. She swung hard, shattering the dollhouse roof. The chandelier crashed down, beads scattering. But the whispers rose into screams, deafening, furious. Sophie shrieked upstairs, her voice mingling with the cries. Elena dropped the hammer and bolted up the stairs, her heart in her throat. She burst into Sophie's room. The bed was empty. The dollhouse, however, now stood in the corner of Sophie's room. She hadn't carried it there. She couldn't have. Yet it sat there, whole again, untouched, glowing with a sickly light. And inside, a new doll stood in the upstairs bedroom. A doll with dark hair. A doll wearing Sophie's pajamas. Elena screamed, clawing at the miniature window. Inside, Sophie's porcelain face turned slowly toward her, lips parting as if to speak. The whisper came, soft and final. Now she won't be lonely anymore. The dollhouse door slammed shut, and Sophie was gone. The next morning, Mark found Elena sitting catatonic on the floor, staring at the dollhouse. 3 dolls stood at the dining table, one in blue, one in brown, and a little girl in cream. Upstairs, in the tiny bedroom, 2 dolls now stood side by side. Sisters, at last. The whispers had gone silent. But sometimes, late at night, neighbors passing by swear they hear a faint giggle from the Carver house. And in the window, just for a moment, they see a small figure watching, smiling. Have you ever walked into a place and immediately felt wrong? Not just uncomfortable, but the kind of wrong that makes the hairs on your neck stand on end? That's exactly how Claire felt when she arrived at her late aunt's Victorian house. The storm was relentless. Rain pelted her windshield, turning the narrow country road into a blur of gray. And then, through the mist, the house appeared. It rose like a shadow from another time. Gray, towering, with windows that seemed almost like eyes, watching. Claire gripped the steering wheel tighter. She hadn't been close to her aunt. Letters, occasional calls, nothing more. Yet now she held a tarnished old key, cold in her hand, ready to open a house she had barely known. The instant she stepped inside, a chill ran through her. Not from the rain or the cold. The air itself was thick with dust, decay, and something faintly sweet, like a perfume left to rot. Shadows clung to the corners, stretching and twisting whenever she looked away. The furniture was sparse and shrouded in sheets, and portraits of stern ancestors stared down from the walls, eyes sharp and judgmental. But it wasn't until she reached the attic that she found something unexpected. A large, dusty tarp lay in the corner. She pulled it aside and uncovered a dollhouse. It was stunning, perfect in every detail. Tiny wallpapered rooms, miniature chairs, little paintings hung on the walls. But the dolls, oh, the dolls. One knelt as if praying. Another sat stiffly at a miniature table, a cup balanced carefully in front of it. And one, the little auburn-haired girl, stood out. Her frozen smile didn't reach her glassy eyes. Claire swore it was looking at her. She shook her head, trying to convince herself it's just a toy. Still, she moved it to her bedroom. It would be a centerpiece, something charming, nothing more. The first night, she woke to a faint giggle. Soft, childlike, almost playful. She froze, thinking it was the wind. And then she saw it. The little auburn-haired doll had moved. She was no longer seated at the table. She stood in the middle of the dollhouse hallway. Claire's pulse quickened. She tried to tell herself it was an accident. Maybe she had nudged it without realizing. But then the oddities continued. Footsteps echoed in empty hallways. Cold drafts brushed past her, even though every window was closed. And the mirrors reflected her strangely. Sometimes her reflection smiled while she frowned. Sometimes it turned toward the dollhouse, even when she faced away. Then there was the scratching. Nails against wood, soft and deliberate, that seemed to come from the dollhouse itself. The auburn-haired doll tilted her head, following Claire's every move, like she was alive. Her rational mind screamed at her to leave. But curiosity, and something darker, something that felt like the house itself wanted her there, kept her inside. Sleep became impossible. When she did drift off, the dreams were vivid, terrifyingly vivid. She found herself shrunk, walking inside the dollhouse. Every room towered over her like a building. The dolls moved, whispering her name, circling her. The little auburn-haired girl came close, its tiny voice like broken glass. "Play with us, forever." Claire tried to scream, but no sound came. She ran, hiding under chairs that were now massive, like pillars, crawling through hallways the size of entire rooms. But the dolls were everywhere, always watching, always grinning. When she woke, The dolls were no longer in the dollhouse. 3 of them were standing on the floor, staring at her. Their eyes glimmered in the flickering candlelight like coals in a fire. Desperation pushed Claire to investigate. She dug through old letters and records, piecing together her aunt's strange, isolated life. Neighbors remembered laughter and crying from the house when Claire was a child. Sounds that made no sense. They didn't know what had caused it, only that it was unnatural. Finally, in the attic, Claire discovered her aunt's journal. The pages were yellowed and brittle, filled with meticulous notes, diagrams, and warnings. Her aunt had trapped human souls in the dolls. Every miniature figure was alive. Every one fed on anyone who came near. The final warning froze Claire in place. Once a doll leaves the house, the curse spreads. Beware the laughter. Once you hear it, it is already too late. She realized then, the dolls weren't just moving. They were hunting. Every attempt to touch them made them stronger. That night, Claire decided she had to destroy the dollhouse. She carried it to the center of her bedroom, doused it in gasoline, and struck a match. Flames erupted, licking the walls and ceiling. The dolls screamed. It wasn't just the fire. They shrieked with human-like voices, high-pitched and twisted. Smoke filled the room, and Claire staggered back, tears streaming down her face. The fire consumed every last detail: the furniture, the tiny cups and chairs, the dolls themselves. Silence followed. For a brief moment, she thought it was over. Morning light revealed a blackened, ruined room. The dollhouse was gone. Relief washed over Claire. And then she saw it. A tiny handprint on the wall. Perfectly formed, unnatural, small. Not a child's, not an adult's. Something had watched her the entire night. She didn't stay to see what else might happen. She fled, never returned. Even years later, Claire still hears it. Sometimes late at night, the faint giggle of a doll drifts to her ears. Sometimes she swears she sees tiny figures at the corner of her vision, patient, waiting for her to return to room 7. And if you think this is just a story, think again. Even now, while I'm telling you, I can feel it watching, waiting. And maybe, just maybe, it's looking at you, too.